All right, let's take a look at how to actually create random numbers and some of the options we have when we're doing that and some tips of things to look out for. First of all, let me clear that output. So the first thing you're going to want to do when you want to create random numbers is they're not built into Python, so you're going to have to bring in the random functions by importing them. So sometimes you might have already imported math in the past. Now we're going to start importing random. You could make it a habit just to put this at the top of every one of your pieces of code to just say, hey, these are things I might want to use, so I might as well just bring them in. It's not really going to make an impact on you in terms of memory use. Theoretically, if you're really, trying to create a game and you didn't need these things in it, you wouldn't want to slow the game down by importing a bunch of random stuff, but it doesn't really hurt. The other thing you need to know is if you're using Replit or Code Sculptor, an online environment, you don't need to worry about this next step. But if you have downloaded a Python environment, and so maybe you're coding in idle or some other coding environment, do not save this file as random.py. So, when you're going to save your work and it asks you for a name and you're making random numbers, you might be tempted to do that. But actually, random.py is what the name of the random functions is saved as already on your computer. And if you were to save this as random.py, you'd be overriding the same thing you're trying to import, and then you just get errors that wouldn't make any sense to you because things just wouldn't work even though all your code would look correct. And it's just because of the name you gave the program. So that's a tip that we had to learn the hard way. Okay, but let's just say we want to make a random number. So how do we do that? So what we're going to do is we're mostly only going to use this one function inside random because I find it so handy. But there is a lot of other things you could dig into in randomness. Um, but making random numbers and using them is really what we care about. So if I was to say rand int, that means a random integer. It'd be hard to make a random decimal if you think about it, but it actually can do it. And you can use those decimals for other things. But most of the time, when we want randomness, we would just want an integer that we can kind of read easily. Rand int is a function. Sorry for my bell. Randint is a function that takes two arguments. They are the low number that you would want, like the lowest integer, and the highest integer. And so you can put that in, so if you didn't want it to choose anything below 10, you could make the lowest one 10 and then the highest one 20. And that's like choose a number between 10 and 20. Most of the time, our lowest one is just 1. Let's just say we want to create a number from 1 to 100. But it doesn't have to be. You can do anything you want. And then we could print that number. And then when we run this, we should get a random number from 1 to 100. And if we ran it again, we'd get a different number each time. Maybe we'd get the same number twice in a row, but it's rare. But hey, that's what makes random number generation, or RNG, lots of fun. When you play games with RNG and the same thing happens over and over again, or you never get the random loot that you want, this can be a frustrating thing. Just to show you kind of how it works a little bit, you could throw a while loop in here if you've learned loops, and you could just say, hey, I want to make a while that runs forever. So while 1 equals 1, will 1 ever not equal 1? No. So this is going to run forever until I hit the stop button. Oh, well, that was stupid. It just created the same number 19. Why? Because my while loop was only printing. It wasn't actually creating the number. So what if I put this actually up here and indented it there? Now it's creating a number and printing it inside the loop. So now we get a whole bunch of different numbers. So if I stop it, I can look, oh, look at that. It created 99 and 100 right in a row. I never got a single digit number, but it could have. Yeah, there's some single digit numbers. So, for our purposes completely random. How does a computer pick a random number in its head? You might be wondering, like, it's not a human, so it can't just say, oh, I wonder what number I should pick. So there's a lot of math going on behind the scenes in random number generation that actually makes that happen. And figuring out how to seed random number generators is a whole, like, major and probably grad school kind of level stuff that you could do if you really wanted to dig into it. It's kind of interesting and fun. So that's how you basically make random numbers, and from there you can do all sorts of things with them. What we typically do with them, rather than a number, is we might create a random number, but then we want to do something with it. So we might be like, well, if the number you chose was a 1, then, do something. And if your number you chose was a 2, then do something. So we use a lot of if statements with random numbers so that different things happen depending on what random number gets chosen. And that's basically it. There are some other functions that you might learn to use for some of the assignments that I'm going to give, but I'll put those in the assignment tips themselves.